everyone. I'm here again to continue my report about the Walnut Street Jail. So, in 1773, the Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, a new jail was opened to receive overcrowded prisoners. So, the Walnut Street Jail is the I mean new the Walnut Street Jail or the new jail was is its purpose is to to remove the overcrowded the High Street Jail at located Walnut Street. And so Walnut Street Jail was made to really transfer the prisoners to give solution the overcrowded prisoner of High Street Jail. So Walnut Street Jail was made to relieve the overcrowded prisoner from High Street. So that's what I'm. Walnut Street was typically U-shaped design to to world to the world largest numbers of inmates. They are targeting a large number of inmates that will accommodate in Walnut Street Jail. Imagine it was really a lot of criminal from High Street Jail to um high from the crime of the past. So imagine there is a lot of criminals. Next slide please. So a new cell block called Penitentiary House was added in 1790, built with a courtyard existing structure, including the included a series of small cells, individual prisoners to the cells or connecting were arranged to prevent prisoners in communicating with each other. And this is the details of the Walnut Street Jail, and this purpose is to limit the freedom of the prisoner inside their cells. So as a penitentiary, solitary confinement was the goal, but such facilities are available for about third of those admitted. Other prisoners were made to sleep naked in a common room. So that penitentiary and that is the reason of the less ventilated facilities that have in a Walnut Street Jail. So the Walnut Street Jail was planned to be in 17 converted to into a penitentiary in 1790, but because of political reasons, the the transformation did not occur till 1795. So because of um, other overcrowding the solitary confinement goal didn't follow, because some of serious offenders are and more than one inmate in place in the one cell. So because of that the isolation will terribly psychological effect of inmates. So and that is the reason why inmates are sleep naked, and eventually inmates were given in cell on which they work up to 8 hours a day. So despite of this their difficulties, similar institutions were constructed in New York, in Newgate in 1797. So even there are so many difficulties, there is a new build institution in Newgate in 1797, similar to Walnut Street Jail. So the Walnut Street Jail is the model of the Pennsylvania system, because it was built in during the Pennsylvania it was built during the Pennsylvania model, but there is other prisons existing during that time, which is the Pittsburgh in 1821 and Eastern State Penitentiary, Cherry Hill in Eastern Philadelphia in 1836. So the Trenton State Prison in New Jersey the same year. So some people were interested in the Walnut Street Prison because of their concept. So some visitors from overseas who were interested in prison reform visited Walnut Street Jail. So they want to reform their own prison. I mean that some visitor wants to know the concept or the the way of handling the handling the prison and the inmates inside that institution. So and that is the reason why they visited the Walnut Street Prison. So next slide. So meanwhile, in 1821, a new prison was built or was opened in New York town of Auburn. So that prison are every individual inside of that imprisonment. So every individual inside the prison are work 10 hours per day, 6 days per week, and a number of prison reforms that they believe that way inmates work in an atmosphere free from corruption or criminal behavior. So that way, and that is their way to rehabilitate their inmates. So and this system became known as the Auburn system, and it was followed in 1826 with the opening of Sing Sing Prison on the banks of the Hudson River. This is and before that, Auburn and the Auburn prison is the replacement in the Walnut, because Walnut that time is overcrowded. So next slide. So let's continue. King Henry VIII. So King Henry was born in June 28, 1492 at the place of Placentia in Greenwich. So King Henry Tudor was the third child and second son of Henry VII and Elizabeth of York. So Henry is the best known for his 6 marriages. His disagreement with Pope Clement VII about such an annulment led Henry to initiate the English Reformation, separating the Church of England from papal authority. He appointed himself the supreme head of the Church of England and dissolved converts and monasteries, for which as he was excommunicated. Next slide. So Henry VIII was died in January 28 in 1547 and was king of England from 1509 until his death in 1547. So Henry is the best known of the 6 marriage. So what I say? So Henry, because of his insecurity, Henry built more than 50 ships and established the Navy board. So that is one of his achievements, and he also known as the father of the Royal Navy. So next slide. So domestically, Henry is known for his radical changes to the English constitution, ushering that in the theory of the divine right of kings. So he also greatly expanded royal powers during his reign. So he frequently used charges of treason and heresy to quell dissent, and those accused were often executed without a formal trial by means of bills of attainder. So he achieved many of his political aims through the work of his chief minister, some of whom were banished or executed when they fell out of his favor. So Thomas Wolsey and Thomas More Thomas Cromwell, and Richard Rich, and Thomas Cranmer all figured prominently in his administration. King Henry is also known as a serial killer because he executed almost 57,000 people. Other are members of the clergy, ordinary citizens, and nobles who had taken part in the uprising and protests up and down and country, including for the two wives he beheaded. So that his purpose is, and his administration, he killed that he felt that he against his want. So that way he executed many lives. So next slide. So Bridewell Palace in London was built as a residency of King Henry VIII and was one of his homes early in his reign for 8 years, given the City of London Corporation by his son King Edward VI for use as an orphanage and place of correction for wayward women. Bridewell later became the first prison poorhouse to have appointed doctor. It was built on the banks of the Fleet River, in the City of London, between Fleet Street and the River Thames, in an area today as known as Bridewell Place. So, of the New Bridge Street in 1556, part of it had become a jail known as Bridewell Prison. So, that time, the new prison was built, and that's called the Bridewell Prison. It was reinvented with lodgings and was closed in 1855, and the buildings demolished in 1863 to 1864. And then the name Bridewell subsequently became a common name of the jail, used not only in England but in other English in speaking cities including Dublin, Chicago, and New York. So next slide. So next slide. The influence and legacy and in particular and popular culture. So the name Bridewell became synonymous with a large prison and was consequently used as generic name for them. So it was adopted for other prison in London. So including the Clerkenwell in Bridewell, opened in 1615. So then a new prison, in that prison develop or adopt the Bridewell prison. So and Tothill Fields Bridewell in Westminster, similar institution throughout England. So in Ireland, so Scotland and Canada as well as the United States also borrowed the name Bridewell. So the term frequently refers to the city's main borough, the name Bridewell, and the term frequently refer to a city main detention facility, usually close to courthouse, as in so in Nottingham, Leeds, Gloucester, Bristol, Dublin, Cork, and Edinburgh. So next slide. Next slide. So King Edward VI, a jewel of King Henry. So next slide. King Edward VI. So on October 12, 1537, King Edward was born, and until the July 6, 1553, was the King of England and Ireland from 28 January. So the King of England and Ireland. So from 28th of January 1547 until his death in 1553, he was crowned on 20th February at the age of 9. So Edward was the son of Henry VIII and Jane Seymour. So in the England, first monarch to be raised as a Protestant. So during his reign, the realm was governed by a regency. So council because he never reached maturity. The council was the first lead of his uncle Edward Seymour, the first Duke of Seymour in 1547 to 1549. So, and then by John Dudley, the first Earl and Warwick in 1550 to 1553, who from 1551 was the Duke of Northernland. So next slide. So Edward's reign was marked by economic problems and social unrest that in 1549 erupted into riot and rebellion and expensive of war with Scotland. So in his throne there are so many contra con contra contradict of his contradict of his administration. So that erupted riot and rebellion against his administration. So an expensive war with Scotland, the first successful, ended with military withdrawal from Scotland and Bologna and Sormer in exchange for peace. So the transformation of the Church of England into a recognizable Protestant body also occurred under Edward, who took great interest in religious matter. So although his father Henry VIII had served the link between the church and the Rome, Henry VIII had never permitted the renunciation of Catholic doctrine or ceremony. It was during Edward's reign that Protestant was established for the first time in England, with reforms included the abolition. So next slide. Abolition of electrical celibacy and the mass. So and the imposition of compulsory service in English. So next slide. In February 1553, at the age of 15, Phil ill when his sickness was discovered to be terminal. He and his council drew up and devised for the succession to prevent the country return to Catholicism. Edward named his first cousin once removed Lady Jane Grey as his heir, excluding and his half-sister Mary and Elizabeth. This decision was disputed following Edward's death, and Jane was disposed by Mary 9 days after becoming queen. During her reign, Mary reversed Edward's Protestant reforms, which nonetheless became the basis of Elizabeth's religious settlement of 1559. The next slide. So Bridewell's transition to a prison. Henry VIII, the son, Edward VI in 1553 gave the palace to the city of London for use as imprisonment or penalty offender. So that time in 1553, the palace to the city of London was used as a prison for the petty offenders. So next slide. So offenses included prostitution with women often described as night walkers, or accused of strolling in the streets and picking up men, pilfering and other petty thefts, fraud being runaway or disorderly apprentice and servants. So next slide. And begging or being peddlers and petty capman, selling goods without a license, having been taken wandering or sleeping in the streets, having with no visible means of earning and living, abusing the poor relief system, insulting officers, pawning the clothes provided, making fraudulent claims, or carrying Confederate passes, counter, counterfeit passes, returning to the city of London after being passed on the parish of settlement, committing a host of other types of disorderly conduct, including swearing, drunkenness, and assault, or simply lost idle and disorderly conduct. So that's all the law that provide of King Edward. The next slide. So Bridewell operated under a royal charter. So and that called as Act of Parliament. So as a whole, so every meeting will be recorded, and most especially the attendance of every government, every offender, and the governors were responsible for the appointment of new governors, as well as the appointment of all the hospitals. Officers including president, treasurers, and editor generally, they also appointed actually to carry out the work in the hospital, including stepwards, beadles, porters, matrons, and many more. So next slide. Pause. So, the closure of Bridewell. Towards the close of the 18th century, prison reforms became increasingly critical of Bridewell. Along with the other prisons, far from reforming individuals, prisons were becoming training grounds for criminals, corrupting prisoners into more serious crimes upon release. So, towards the close of 18th century, the prisons were reforming, so they are developed and target their goal to reform every prisoners inside their institution to change that criminal behavior. So as the influence of the reformers spread, prison condition began to improve, such as abolition of wiping females. So however, that the introduction of solitary confinement become the norm. So the improvement and the closure of the Bridewell there is also improvement. And Bridewell was closed as a prison by 1855. Come 1864, the prison buildings were demolished. So the prison are demolished in 1864. So the only evidence left behind the former gatehouse with a carving of Edward VI in the Ark located on Black Blackfriars, London. So next slide. So and that's all of my report. Institutional correction. And again, my name is Kirby Katipay, and thank you and goodbye. God bless.